Mr. O'Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, you said in your opening comments that you would never send our men and women into harm's way without the necessary readiness, the necessary equipment, and the necessary doctrine. I think you'd also agree that we shouldn't send them in harm's way without the necessary strategy. I'm having a very difficult time in light of the 6 months during which we've been at war in Iraq and Syria against ISIS, and in light of the President's authorization for the use of military force, or AUMF, that is now before this Congress for consideration. I'm having a very hard time understanding what the strategy is. And I want to make sure that, as my colleagues have said, that we fund our military well beyond the budget caps and the sequester levels. I agree with them there. But I think perhaps more importantly, that we have the necessary strategy in place so that their efforts, those men and women serving this country and our interests overseas, are not in vain. Could you answer the strategy question for me?
Certainly. First of all, strategy does take, in addition to geographic perspective, a multi-year perspective and a multi-year commitment, which is why annual budgetary turmoil isn't consistent with our strategy and taking a strategic view. With respect to the strategy against ISIL and defeating ISIL, in Iraq, I think the first thing I'd say is that we not only need to defeat ISIL, we need to defeat them in a lasting manner. And that's always the difficult part. We can defeat ISIL, but defeating them in a lasting manner means having somebody on the ground who keeps them defeated after we assist them in the defeat. On the Iraq side of the border, that is the Iraqi government, a multi-sectarian force organized by the Iraqi government. That's our strategic objective.
If I could interrupt there, we'll just take the Iraqi portion of this.
Okay.
From my understanding, based on the testimony from the excellent series of hearings that the Chairman's brought before us, our strategy there largely relies on training, equipping, and advising the Iraqi National Army. We have spent tens of billions of dollars doing just that from 2003 to 2010 to awful effect. The Army melted in the face of a far inferior enemy. What is different about our strategy today that's going to ensure its success?
Well, it will hinge, as it did then, upon a multi-sectarian approach by the government of Iraq. Without that, it cannot succeed. And what happened to the Iraqi security forces a year ago was that they collapsed because sectarianism had taken root in the government of Iraq, and the people who lived in the regions that were swept over by ISIL were not willing to accept or support the Iraqi security forces as they were then configured. They need to be configured in a non-sectarian manner or a multi-sectarian manner, or it won't be possible to have that lasting defeat of ISIL on the Iraqi side of the border. It's as critical now as it was last year.
Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, the strategy, insofar as we understand it today, I think is insufficient to achieving the President's aims of degrading and destroying ISIS, to your aims of ensuring a lasting defeat of ISIS. I think if we're honest with ourselves and the American public and the service members who will act out the policies of this country, if we are going to achieve those aims, we are going to need U.S. ground forces in Iraq and Syria. We cannot depend on a Syrian moderate opposition force. We cannot depend on the political whims of the different sectarian factions in Iraq. We should not depend on Iranian-backed Shia militias in that country as well. If we're going to do this, let's be honest about what it's going to take to do it. And with today's topic of the budget in mind, do we have the resources necessary in the President's request to support ground forces to achieve our tactical and strategic goals in Syria and Iraq vis-a-vis ISIS?
I'll answer that first, and the Chairman may want to add something to it. We do have the resources to support our strategy. The one ingredient, very important ingredient that you left out was air power, and we are applying air power in a very effective way in support of ground forces that are not U.S. ground forces, but that are local ground forces, because we want a lasting defeat of ISIL, and only local forces on the ground can impose a lasting defeat. And that's our strategy. Chairman?
And if I could, just in the interest of time, Chairman, I'll take this for the record, because I do think the strategic advantage we have is the coalition, and I think that will eventually be the path to an enduring defeat. But I'll take it for the record.
Thank you both.